In today's episode, we'll be discussing a number of interesting topics with our guests, who I'm delighted to welcome and introduce. So, Louis from Satcen and Johanne from Capella Space. For those that don't know, this series is a part. This is a series, a part of a video series that we're doing across space generally. And for the listeners that don't know Watson Farley Williams, it's a global law firm and one of the leading law firms within the space sector. I personally have been involved in the space market across the last 10 to 15 years. So that's a brief introduction of Watson Farley Williams and myself. So Johanne and Louis, delighted to have you, and we'll hand over to yourselves to introduce Capella and Satcen respectively.
Great. So I can start, Louis, if it's okay with you?
Please, ladies
Okay.
first.
Okay, so I've been in the space industry for about 25 years, and I just joined at the beginning of the year Capella Space. I'm located in Washington, D.C., but Capella Space has two headquarters, one in San Francisco and one in Louisville, Colorado. Capella Space is a SAR, satellite temperature radar constellation. So it provides data that can see through even in dark condition over very heavy cloud cover. And I'll speak a little bit more about Capella, but for my background, very quickly, I have been, like I said, in space for 25 years. I started my career from a telecom/satellite operator perspective. I worked for about 10 years at Airbus, Defense and Space, and Thales Alenia Space, and also worked for satellite operators, and more recently for a space situation awareness startup in Montreal.
Wow.
Over to you, Louis.
Thank you, Johanne. Thank you, Randy. So I'm a Navy officer. I've been in the Navy for 30 years and really working on space and intelligence during the last 15 years. I entered also space on communication issues and went to broad intelligence and Earth observation. So Satcen is a EU agency. It was founded in 1992, so more than 30 years ago, as a Western European Union agency, and integrated the European Union in 2002. We are based in Madrid, in Spain, and we are the key agency in the EU supporting the common foreign and security policy and the common security and defense policy. What we provide is decision-making, information, intelligence, operational situational awareness at political level up to the High Representative of the European Union. But what is very important is that we share it with the 27 member states of the European Union. What is important is that we are an agency of the Council, so we are totally working with the 27 member states and the intelligence services and in the broader EU space and defense ecosystem. Our users, I said, are mainly European Union, member states intelligence services for about 1/3. Then European Union missions and operation, 20% of our products in supporting EU missions. But also agencies that need some geospatial support, typically like Frontex, that we are entrusted by the European Union and Frontex to provide them some situational awareness on traffics and on migration issues. And we also do some EU external engagement. For example, we have been supporting the OSCE before the invasion in Ukraine, and we are also supporting international organizations like the United Nations.
Perfect. Delighted to have you both on the podcast.
Thank you.
And it's great that we've got a provider of Earth observation data and then also a downstream user of Earth observation data as well. So picking up on that, Johanne, I mean, I suppose Capella is a provider of Earth observation data, but it is a crowded market. So how do you differentiate yourself in that market?
Well, it is a crowded market. There's not that much competition from a SAR perspective, but I think our big differentiator is that in order to provide reliable SAR data, you have to have a constellation that is, or an ecosystem that is reliable and adaptable. because the end user needs to have data where and when they need it. I think one of our core strengths is that it's very important we developed a fully automated and secure tasking and delivery system. It actually puts the user in control. So there's no human intervention. Everything is very simple task and very, very efficient. And so that's a huge advantage for tasking. Also, Capella is vertically integrated. So it means that we actually design and manufacture our own spacecraft. We developed our own in-house operation and also the fully integrated system all the way to the user. I think one of our advantage, because we're agile and relatively small, is that we can basically manufacture a spacecraft from design to manufacture in about 12 months. Also, I think when you talk about a differentiator, sometimes in the market, you will hear people saying, well, we compare constellation just in terms of sheer number of spacecraft. I think it's important to notice that when you're evaluating a company that will provide superior data set, it's not just about the number of satellites, it's about the sophistication of the payload on board the satellite. So in our case, we have very high bandwidth SDR, software defined radio. We have large antenna, we have onboard signal processing. And also very important, we have a diversity of orbit from inclined to sun synchronized. So I think all those factors allow us to really stand out as a high quality SAR data delivery mechanism.
That's brilliant. And I suppose flicking over to the other side, Satcen as a sort of downstream user, what are the key requirements that you guys look for in your data providers and their capabilities?
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Well, there is a common misconception about Satcen is that we don't operate our satellites, but we directly procure and buy commercial data from private operators. And today, about 1/3 of the resources that are made available to the center, either coming directly from the member states or from the European Union budget, is dedicated to buy some data. So it's quite important part of our budget. What we look first is about more data, of course, better availability, to have the images when we need it to deliver the product, as most of our products are done in less than 24 hours once we have the image. So we're trying to have the shortest loop as we can. We also try to prioritize a diverse range of sensors, not only optical, radar, but also signal, infrared, multispectral, trying to fill the gaps to have some complementary approach on our work, and trying to integrate those complementary technologies to capture a more complete and accurate picture of the arrays we analyze. So after this first part about diversity of data, there is last very important capacities to have a secure and guaranteed access to the data. For security and defense, when you have a question which comes either from operational needs or at political level, it's important that we can deliver whatever happens, and the guarantee of access and secured access to data is for us key for our operational users.
I think that nicely segues into sort of one of the other topics that we were going to discuss, which was in this sort of changing geopolitical system and sort of, increased regulation of sort of the digital life, how important is sort of cybersecurity from both your perspectives as a provider and user of that data?
Well, for Capella Space, cybersecurity is very important, and that's why we engineered our constellation so that the user commands are encrypted using AWS, Amazon Web Services government cloud. And the payload and telemetry data are also encrypted through the downlink all the way to the ground stations. And it's important to mention that as a customer, your tasking is private. It's the platform isolates the tasking the customer use from the platform. I think one of the things we're very proud is our CEO, Frank Bacchus, led Capella to become a founding member of an organization called Space ISAC. It stands for Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And what it is it provides the space industry, the global space industry, a forum of collaboration to report incident, to fight against cyber threats, to protect against bad actors that are trying to exploit space infrastructure vulnerability. And it increases communication so everybody can inform and educate one another of how to fight cybercrime.
Perfect. And I think, just moving on to the market as a whole, I suppose, when you look at sort of how things have been going, particularly in the Earth observation space, do you guys see, I think from our perspective over recent years, we've sort of seen a little bit of a slowdown, particularly against sort of acquisition, the types of companies that were kind of going on. But how do you guys see the market?
Louis, you want to go first or I can go first?
I will go first. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if you also wanted me to say a few things on the cyber issues or.
Sure, yeah. Sure, Louis.
I'll be quite quick. First, there is a legal obligation for all EU agencies and companies to fulfill the requirements of the EU Cybersecurity Act. So first, we work on it, and this means also more resources dedicated to cybersecurity, also in terms of software, but also in terms of skills and competences. Second thing, we have a wide variety of actors. So we have developed on the secure network, which is at the EU secret level, digital platform, which is our secret network where we work directly with our users. And third, what is important, and we look at now, and we do some work with some consortium, is how to ensure the integrity of the data that we receive, to make sure that there is not a man in between once the image is sent by the operator and the one who are going to analyze, that the image is trustful, and trying to do some either watermarking or any other technology we are looking at to make sure that we can trust the images, and it has not been modified, I would say, by any artificial intelligence or something, by someone in the middle. So it's about protecting and securing our networks, about the data integrity, and last, of course, the availability and confidentiality of all the data we are using. Then, coming to the question about the EU Earth observation market. In the EU, more and more nations are acquiring capacities. You had the four historical ones, which were France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Then there are some projects and soon to be launched, for example, capacities from Luxembourg, Poland, the Czech, but also Romania and a few others. So it's really something which is growing, and there is really a need to get some more data and more assets. For Satcen, we really have a model where we look forward to be able to use some governmental own, access to governmental own assets. And we're discussing with the one who has some capacities to have access to it. But also we are really looking forward to the industry to complement it and to still have which is today playing an important part in everything we work on. What is interesting is when I look more widely in the world, of course, the US providers are the most important provider of data, and the one who also can provide some data, but also selling some satellites. I would say there are some in the EU, of course, Israel and Japan. And so we only have it's a small field, and I also believe that it's always upon a political decision also to know from whom you want to get the messages. This is why, for example, I didn't quote the one other big provider of images, which is China, that obviously we're not going to use because we're really looking forward to work with like-minded partners.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, and I can say a few words of the EO market, especially from a SAR perspective. So I agree with you that there was a little law. There are many reasons for that. In the US, there was some sort of a resolution ongoing that made it difficult to spend from a defense perspective. But I think we're over that, and I think the SAR market is definitely growing, but it is kind of an immature market in the sense that it's receiving a SAR image. The analytics is much more complicated than looking at the optical image. So we need to develop the market through education, through support. We found out that the best way to do that is not necessarily by spending a lot of energy doing the data analytics by ourselves in-house. We prefer to have, we built like a big ecosystem of what we call our analytic partners. So we have recruited companies like Safran, Satcen in Poland, Capella Space. And so what they do is they specialize in end user application. And we're working with them to actually develop business case and specific data analytics for the end user. The end users often is not sophisticated, so they want partners that will deliver exactly what they need in terms of actionable items and specific customized data. So we're doing a lot of that in collaboration with our partners, and also training. We provide a lot of training in countries for using SAR data and for data analytics.
That's perfect. And it dovetails nicely into sort of the next thing we're talking about, which I think is the sort of the use of data. And look, AI is now a household name, right? AI, you've got OpenAI, you've got DeepSeek. They're bringing powerful AI tools to the masses. How do you both see the role of AI within this market? And is that going to be on the analytics side, sort of identifying strategic assets or people?
Louis?
All right, yes, thank you. Yes, of course. I mean, at Satcen, we have developed our in-house specialized applications. And every time when we develop some artificial intelligence applications, we really look forward to streamline the analyst work and not to replace them. It's really supporting them. One of our big drivers is that we don't want to be 100% reliable on artificial intelligence. And it cannot completely replace the human analyst, but it has to enhance their capabilities, make them able to work much quicker. The usual example which is given, for example, is when we need to scan kilometers and hundreds of kilometers of blue ocean to look for 5-meter boats. AI can be very useful to bring the eye of the analyst on the boat, but after he will have to bring its knowledge, its critical thinking, its contextual understanding, which is always very important in our work, and also strategic decision making. So it's always a complementary that is useful, but have to keep in mind that we are careful because it's not always 100% reliable.
Okay, good. And on our side, AI is actually critical. So that's why when I was mentioning our ecosystem of APP, which means Analytic Partner Program, we find out that many of those partners have highly educated experts and leaders of AI and machine learning. And for them, in order to do all the analytics that Louis just mentioned, it takes a lot of data to actually machine learn and create very specific value-added solution for the SAR data sets. So what we do is we have a very, very large archive of SAR images. And when we sign with the partners, we actually render this very large archive of SAR images available for the partners so they can use it, provide also technical resources in-house for them to develop a solution to improve their products. And just to give a few kudos to those partners, we have actually onboarded about 50 companies so far. But amongst the certified experts, I just wanted to give them a highlight. So I mentioned Ursonet and Safran. Ursonet does and Safran are providing many usages, but principally for aircraft and vessel classification that you were talking about, Louis. Satcen is also an excellent partner for vessel classification, but we also have T-Carta, which does an excellent job for coastline monitoring. We have Flood Base for flood insurance. And maybe another one that stands out is LiveEO for asset monitoring and post-storm damage assessment. So we rely also on all those experts from our partners to develop those applications. And the more applications are developed and the more data, the more reliable and useful they become for end users such as Louis.
Perfect. And I think, Joanne, you just touched there on a few different verticals that, Capella has, and obviously there's many, many uses for the data that you guys provide. What are sort of the core verticals for Capella, and which are the ones that you see the most growth in?
Okay. Well, the first one that comes into mind, obviously, is defense and intelligence. What we see are MOD and DOD customer, what they want is identification and tracking of aircraft, missile. They want to see if there are any helicopters and ships. And by correlation, maritime awareness. So they want to have port surveillance. They want to track ships, ship-to-ship transport. There's some key trade routes that we want to provide surveillance for. There's, of course, illegal fishing. And especially in the north, there's new Arctic routes, trade routes being developed. We want to have surveillance. And I would say the last one that are core, aircraft detection and classification. And also, I think in terms of growth, I see three more that are already there, but developing fast. One is agriculture for crop monitoring and yield estimation. We have, of course, with the global warming, disaster and emergency management. So people want to see the info on road infrastructure, environmental changes, reservoir uses. And lastly, mining. I think in order to evaluate the presence of certain minerals, and also from a mine perspective for the surveillance of the exploitation and the maintenance equipment.
Wow, that's a lot of markets. It's great that your data can be used in such a big way. I mean, looking at the sort of the role of government, and look, we all know that we've got a new US administration, and I think the US has long had a long history with the space market and its influence on it. Do you guys see the new US administration with Elon Musk playing a sort of prominent role, making things easier for space companies to flourish, or is it a case of business as usual?
Well, maybe I could go first on this one. For me, I think it's important to mention that the support of the government for commercial friendly relationship, it's not new. It has been building for years. And I don't expect that to change with the new administration. There's been a move for the last 5 years of insurance that the commercial space capability are available to the DoD whenever they're needed. But as an example of that, last April, I think the DoD published what they call the first comprehensive commercial space integration strategy. And what that meant is that they say, how can we help the usage of commercial assets? And there was many chapter in it, but it went like encouraging norm and standards, offering financial protection for commercial companies that are taking risk at building things for the DoD. There's many new flexible contract mechanism that have been implemented for the industry. There's a more info sharing of threats. And I'll just conclude by giving a fantastic example, which is the US Space Force created the SDA, the Space Development Agency, 5 years ago. And the goal was to, of course, have a very agile government procurement agency. But in the process, they were very, very open, not only to use commercial assets, but also international, non-US allied nation buses and various payload, proof in the pudding with optical links that by TSAT and Minaret, which are two German company, are on board a DoD spacecraft. So basically my point is it has started, and I just think I don't see why with the new administration it wouldn't continue.
Excellent. That's good to hear. It's definitely what the space market needs. It needs the continued influence of both the EU and the US. And look, just alongside the US, picking up on the EU side, it's clearly still a huge player in the space sector, with a huge number of private sector offerings, but also now the development of EU satellite constellations for specific purposes, right? So IRIS² is a prominent example of that. Does Satcen see the sort of collaboration of the public and private sector as important and something that's going to continue?
Yes, of course. I mean, when you look at the EU and the approach to public and private, support to the public and private sectors, I think that historically, when you look at defense issue, member states at national level, they were more in favor of procuring their own assets and controlling it. So it was probably governmental assets. While in the EU and for agencies, it was relying a lot on the private sector to build also some new capacities. And I think there is some kind of convergence today on both sides, on governmental side, to procure more to the private sector, but on the EU side, to try to have a more balanced approach to its space program. Because the space program historically has been really focused on more civilian environmental projects. If you look at Copernicus, there is a clear need to balance it with security and defense. And the next EU space program, I think, if it's going to be much more important in terms of volume and capacities, there will be a clear priority on security and defense, on acquiring new capacities. And I'm sure that this will benefit to both the private sector, but also trying also to acquire some new capacities. I will end that I think that what the private sector can offer in terms of agility of innovation, and the example that Johanne gave us at the beginning, about 12 months from thinking of an asset and manufacturing it, is, I think, a good proof of how agile private sector can be. But I really believe that it's complementary to some flagships that the EU needs to structure its industry also. So I'm really confident that both will continue to be part of the wider scope of European capacities.
Brilliant. And I suppose we can't talk about the government without talking about regulations. I suppose as entities that sort of deal with regulatory hurdles and regulatory and government bodies regularly. If I gave you a magic wand now to wave, is there anything that, any regulations that you would remove or change?
Well, for us, we totally understand the need to have rules such as ITAR and EAR. But if I had a magic wand, it would be for one simple request, which is a far simpler path to exporting American technologies to ally nation. And so what I mean by that is today there's a really cumbersome licensing process. And that gives, we believe, international data and satellite providers a huge advantage because they don't have such constraint. And I'm not talking about, military grade. I'm talking about, simple resolution and performance capabilities that are being offered by China on international market and European competitors. Right now, the process in order to compete at the same level is a little bit heavy. It's improving, but for us, it's a little bit of a disadvantage to be able to compete on the same playing field.
Yes, and on the EU side, I mean, historically, space hasn't been a competence of the European Union. And this is why the space program is a decision taken both by the Council, where member states unanimity to agree on what you want to do, but it's also voted by the European Parliament. And you can see that the process is quite heavy to try to make things. And this is why, following also the Mario Draghi report and the EU space strategy for security and defense on space, there is a big, both interest and willingness to have a common space law to develop the European markets. I mean, today, a few countries have a space law, like France, like Luxembourg, and others, progressively. I think there are quite a few and different, and we really need some kind of harmonization in the European Union to have a wider market. And I think it will benefit, of course, to Satcen as a user, but it will benefit, of course, to the industry to address this market just in one way.
Great. And then looking to the future, Johanne, I mean, I suppose what's next for Capella in its journey, and how do you see the market, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay. So for Capella, we're going to continue to work even closer with sovereign nations because every nation for its defense have different specific needs. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that one new business or product offering that Capella is currently and will continue to improve on is the ability for sovereign and allied nation for us to build their own constellation or their own spacecraft. So I've been in the satellite business for 25 years. I can see that it's a huge advantage to be able to have different business model. So it could be like we are building in the US your satellite and we operate it for you, but it could be completely the opposite. We could actually build it in country and teach you how to operate it, or it could be something in the middle. So it could be fly under our flag, fly under the country flag. And that's really good because many sovereign nations want to have sovereignty on their constellation, task it, and have the whole spacecraft completely dedicated to their needs. So this is something that we're in discussion right now with several sovereign nations with different models. Also, what is really important is that as we continue to push our next generation of satellite to be even better from an analytics and from a bandwidth perspective, it produces a lot of data. So we're going to incorporate the use of optical links in order to accelerate the transmission of data from the spacecraft to ground. And so basically, we're very agile, but we're pushing our engineering teams to always be at the cutting edge of technology to provide the highest resolution and quality we can. And from your second question, from a market perspective, I really believe it's going to continue to grow. But I think one key factor will be the improvement of data analytics, also the improvement of user cases to increase the market, the fusion of different phenomenology from if you do fusion of EO plus SAR plus RF and maybe other such as radio occultation. So the fusion of data will be able to provide a even better image to the end user. And lastly, we see some new analytics being developed. We're testing right now INSAR, which is interferometric data for digital elevation. We also have new techniques called CSI, which is colorized subaperture imagery. So it allows you to, on the map, to pay attention to the highlighted color area of where the problem or the analytics is concentrating. So with new techniques and new user cases, I think it's just going to contribute to sustaining and growing the market.
Excellent. And from the Satcen side, Louis, do you see the needs for your missions changing and perhaps picking up on some of the tech there that Johanne was talking about? Are there any sort of tech or challenges that providers need to solve?
Yes, of course. Satcen is task-driven, and this is very important to understand. That means that I'm not going to work on a subject because I find it appealing, sexy, or interesting. I'm working on a subject because I have a user who is asking me to work on it, either a member state of the EU or either an EU institution working on migrations, on maritime domain awareness, or on any other topic. So because of this wide diversity of users, I need a big diversity of sensors. And this is for me, the first key challenge. But it's a question of orbit, for example. I have some requester who wants to see at the pose, but I also need some other requester who needs some high revisit times, where you need a much more inclined orbits. It's also diversity in terms of sensors. We talked about it, like optical, radar, signal, infrared, hyperspectral, and diversity also in terms of revisit, because I need to tackle a wide variety of tasks. The second challenge, which is less talked about usually, but Johanne pointed it out very wisely a little earlier, is I feel that there is still some, as there is significant progress in hardware investments, the complexity of the analysis we have to do continues to slow us down. And I think that the software ecosystem is still lagging behind, and we really need to do some efforts on the software ecosystem to provide the best analysis and to fill this gap, to be able to use this diversity of sensors also and answer to some very complex situation. Typical example is about climate security, how environmental degradation, but also climate change, can trigger or accelerate the pace to a conflict, can bring some insecurity, first economic insecurity, but also some extreme events that will bring some destabilization. And I think analyzing this is rather complex, and this is really why we need to work on the software. And we do it, and we are really willing to do it with the industry to provide us this kind of support to best use the capacities they are providing, but also trying to answer the questions that we asked by our users.
Brilliant. I mean, that's definitely bringing the two technologies together, and the downstream and the upstream. So I suppose looking at what we've been talking about today and sort of reflecting on the journey for both of you guys, are there two key messages that our listeners should take away, whether it be with respect to the market or each of your respective organizations?
Okay. Well, I think for your listener that are in need of SAR data, I think it's fair to say that Capella has the highest quality SAR system with global coverage, which also provides a fully automated, easy to use tasking and delivery system. And I don't think I've maybe highlighted enough how easy our system is. Basically, if you're a user, you get an API. The process is fully automated for tasking and delivery. There's no human in the loop. And when you get the app, you have a scheduler that runs on 15 minutes cadence. What it does is it optimizes all the collection requests. It sends the tasking to the spacecraft and via our distributed ground system. And so the delivery is super fast. It's automated. You can see exactly which satellite will be taking your picture. And also the delivery can be automated. So that's kind of the core idea. The other sub idea is that, as I mentioned, we're very agile, so we can build our own satellite from design to manufacture in 12 months, but also your sovereign nation spacecraft. And we can do it also with transfer of technology for allied nation, with government authorization, of course, but in your country. And also, I think instead of the strength of Capella is partnership. So we don't want to do everything in-house ourselves. We onboard very competent partners, and we help them, and we work very, very closely to develop end-user applications. And what is the key message for EO? I think EO will continue to grow. I think, as Louis correctly mentioned, we need, even with our other SAR competitor, we need collaboration, because I think we have to keep in mind that the end user wants the best G2, the best intelligence possible, and that includes fusion of optical, RF, SAR, other phenomenology. And I think what we need is to have a great collaboration between data providers, solution partners, the other infrastructure players, so that people like Louis can have, as he mentioned, better quality of data. And we need to increase the speed of delivery for you guys to be able to take quick and pertinent action in a given situation.
Brilliant.
All right, thank you. My first key message is what we need is some diversity in the acquisition of data, diversity of sensors. And if you keep on this line, it's also a question of volume behind. We can see today's conflict and crisis require high volume of information and data. And then going from diversity to volume, I would speak about the speed also of processing, speed of delivery. And we need really to see this diversity linking to the quantity and also to the speed of delivery. This is something really key for us, and trying to make this push forward at the same time. The second, very important for us working in security as defense, is also the trust that we can build with the providers. And here it's mainly about the availability of data when we need it, and also the integrity of data. I think it's not today top on the agenda, but I guess that in some level of disinformation, people will more and more want to be assured that what they get is what is really existing in the real life. So the question of security, of trust, availability, and integrity is also very high on our agenda.
Brilliant. I think we always like to do a light-hearted section with our guests. So I'll hand over to both of you for your best space joke.
I'll go first, but I'll say this disclaimer. This is most probably those are dad jokes. So I have my first one is for Trekkies, the Star Trek. So the question is, how many ears does Captain Kirk have? And the answer is 3. He has the left ear, the right ear, and the final frontier.
I
And because
like
it's and because it's bad, I have a second dad joke. So what did Mars say to Saturn?
I don't know. Go
Hey,
on, Joanne.
give me a ring sometime. Ta-da. Rim shot.
Excellent. Excellent.
Over to you,
Louis,
Louis.
Yeah, so
Try to do better.
I only have one, so it will be much more simple. Why did the satellite need to see the ophthalmologist?
I don't know. Go on.
Because he had an orbital disease.
Very witty.
Yes.
Well, thank you both for joining the podcast. It's been a delight having you both on. We're doing a whole series of these videos, and I'm sure everyone's found it really interesting hearing about the Earth observation market, both from a provider's perspective and a user of data's perspective. You know, there's a changing world out there. There's a lot going on geopolitically, and data and Earth observation and from the defense and also the commercial angles is going to be very important. So thank you everyone for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for having me and Capella Space.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you, Joanne.